one randomization of a vaccine to placebo. Amongst the participants in the interim analysis, approximately 79% were white Caucasian, 8% were Black African American, 4% Native American, 4% Asian, and 22% of the participants were Hispanic. Approximately 20% of the participants were 65 years of age or older, and approximately 60% had comorbidities associated with an increased risk for progression of severe COVID-19, such as diabetes, severe obesity, or cardiac disease. The AstraZeneca-led US phase 3 trial included 2 doses administered at a 4-week interval. And as some of you will know, previous studies have shown that an extended interval of up to 12 weeks has demonstrated greater efficacy, which is also supported by immunogenicity data. This evidence suggests that administration of the second dose with an interval longer than 4 weeks could further increase our efficacy and accelerate the number of people who can receive their first dose. This phase 3 randomized double-blind, placebo-controlled multi-center study took place across 88 trial centers in the United States, in Peru, and Chile. Trial participants were aged 18 years or over, healthy, medically stable chronic diseases, and at increased risk for being exposed to the SARS-CoV-2 virus and COVID-19. They received 2 intramuscular doses of either 5 times 10 to 10 viral particles of AZD1222 or saline placebo 4 weeks apart. Please turn to the next slide. So, the interim results of the AstraZeneca-led US phase 3 trial showed that AZD1222 achieved a statistically significant 79% efficacy of preventing symptomatic COVID-19, and it was 100% effective against stopping severe or critical disease and hospitalization. Notably, the trial also showed similar efficacy results in people over the age of 65 with vaccine efficacy of 80%. Previous studies have shown that an extended interval of up to 12 weeks demonstrated greater efficacy, which has also been supported by immunogenicity data. And this suggests that administration of the second dose with an interval longer than 4 weeks could further increase the vaccine efficacy and accelerate the number of people who can receive their first dose. Patient safety for us is of paramount importance, and today's results also confirm the vaccine's favorable reactogenicity, the reactions that occur soon after vaccination, and the overall safety profile of the vaccine, as seen in previous clinical trials and in real-world data. A specific review of thrombotic events found no increased risk of thrombosis. These US trial results add to the Oxford trial data and a growing body of real-world evidence data that shows that this vaccine is well tolerated and highly effective against all severities of COVID-19 and across all ethnic and age groups studied. Let me now hand over to Ruud, and please turn to the next slide.
Thank you, Mene. I would like to remind you of AstraZeneca's pledge to provide broad and equitable access to this vaccine at no profit during the pandemic. We moved at pace during 2020 to build more than a dozen regional supply chains, leveraging our own industrial capacity and additionally working with more than 20 partners. The vaccine has been granted a conditional marketing authorization or emergency use in more than 70 countries across 6 continents. And with the recent emergency use listing granted by the World Health Organization, this clearly accelerates the pathway to access in up to 142 countries through the COVAX facility. We hope this solid and impressive set of data today will pave the way for millions of Americans and many others to have access to the safe and highly effective vaccine. Please turn to the next slide. And finally, before going to your questions, so given all the evidence we have seen to date, we can say that we have a vaccine that is 100% protective against severe disease, hospitalization and death, 79% effective across against symptomatic COVID-19, and efficacy consistent across age and ethnicity. We also see 80% efficacy in 65 years and older. There's also evidence that suggests that increased efficacy with an interval longer than 4 weeks will remain very important. On safety, we see no serious adverse events confirmed related to AZD1222 in clinical trials. The reactions we did see included temporary injection site pain and tenderness, mild to moderate headache, fatigue, chills, feverish malaise, and muscle ache. On immunogenicity, robust immune response across all adults, including over 56 years, that included T-cell responses 2 weeks after the first dose, neutralizing antibody against the SARS-CoV-2 virus 2 weeks after the second dose. And finally, on administration, ease of use within the healthcare settings, no reformulation needed, stored at between 2 and 8 Celsius, and stable for at least 6 months. We will now shift into the Q&A. Please turn to the next slide. So let me see who will have the first. The first question is from Matt Herper from Stat News. Matt, over to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I had two questions. First, quickly, could you run us through the case numbers for these primary endpoints? How many cases are the 79% and the 100% prevention of severe disease based on? And it looks like the headline number here is better than the results from the previous pooled analysis of 4 trials. And I'm wondering if you have any insight into what differences between the trials and or populations might explain this, knowing the difficulty of comparing across studies.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. Perhaps, Mene, if you can take the first part, and if you have a comment, and then Andy, of course, who was the principal investigator of the Oxford AstraZeneca study, can give his flavor on it. So Mene, over to you.
So there's 141 cases, I said earlier, in terms of the cases that have been counted in the interim, and there's more cases to come for the full primary analysis. With regards to differences between studies, I think this highlights why it's so difficult to compare between studies. The study protocol that we've used here is very similar to the study protocols that have been used by the other vaccines that have run their studies in the US. Things that account for differences in vaccine efficacy, the age of the patients, the endpoints that you're measuring in terms of the severity of the disease, and obviously where you're conducting your studies. So I think all of those things contribute to the differences we see in data. But overall, when you look at the real world efficacy data we're seeing in the UK, the numbers are very similar to the numbers that we see now in this US study. And actually, we also see that with the increased interdose interval, with the studies that were run by Oxford, we also get numbers of up to 82%, 80% or over in terms of vaccine efficacy. So I actually think overall, these studies are all becoming quite consistent now. Andy, would you want to add anything?
Andy, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I completely agree with Mene's comments that every trial protocol is different in the way that the data are collected, the case definition for a case, and also the different health systems will often result in slight differences in the way that people present with COVID. And if you have a case definition that tilts slightly more towards severe cases, as many of the trials do, then you will have a higher efficacy, because we know all the vaccines are much more effective against the more severe end of the spectrum. So I think this is entirely expected to see some differences in different protocols. You just can't compare a different protocol head to head.
Thank you so much, Andy. Let's go to the next question. It's Jenny Strasburg from the Wall Street Journal. Jenny, over to you.
Hi, thanks. I just wondered if you could tell us anything that you learned about variants, any new readouts from this trial and efficacy against variants. And also, do you still expect to be able to manufacture 200 million doses per month starting in April? And there was a little blip for my for my transmission anyway. I didn't hear how many doses you said, Ruud, were ready to go in the US. If you could please repeat that. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. I will take the last two questions. Mene, and perhaps Anne as well, any view on the variants and what work are we doing at the moment regarding the US trial?
And do you want to go first? I can't hear us, so I will. I'll answer. So we are looking at, obviously, at all the variants of concern, and we'll have an analysis of all of the different strains that were in the study. But I think what I can say is that, obviously, given that this study is being conducted much later in terms of timing, it's very encouraging that we've got such high efficacy numbers when there are undoubtedly variants of concern in circulation in this study. And I think it also highlights why we believe that against severe disease, our vaccine will be effective against all variants of concern. We've said this consistently. And I think our data now, where we're doing more like-for-like trial comparisons, I think is much more encouraging in that regard. But we will have data on all variants of concern that have arisen in this study.
And is there anything else you would like to add?
I would just echo those comments. It's an area of active investigation. All those isolates are being sequenced, so we will have an answer, and we're optimistic for a positive outcome there as well.
Thank you. So, Jenny, let me answer the questions regarding supply. So once again, we are going to submit for the EUA in the first half of April. Assuming that the FDA is very supportive. After the approval by the FDA, we will instantly release and deliver 30 million doses in that phase, and then in the same month another 20 million. So in the first month of EUA, we will deliver 50 million, and after that, on average, we will deliver 15 to 20 million doses for the Americans, based on the contract we have with the US government. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, then the next question is from Clive Cookson from the Financial Times. Clive, over to you.
Thank you, Ruud. Thanks for taking the question. I have a couple of questions. First of all, Mene was saying earlier that it looked as though if the interval was more than 4 weeks, vaccine efficacy would increase further. We've heard that before. I just wasn't clear what the evidence is from this trial that would suggest that, and if you can give us any figure for what the efficacy was when you got to 4 weeks on the first dose and hadn't had the second dose. Then I'll have a follow-up question on manufacturing, if that's okay.
So this was a very well conducted study, and actually the interval was very tight. It was patients were all immunized between 4 and 5 weeks. We do have a cohort of patients that had a longer interval because of the pause that we had in the study, so there will be immunogenicity data. The reason that I'm stating that the 3-month interval is optimal because all of the data that we've got from the Oxford UK Brazil studies suggest that the longer interval both increases boosting immunologically and increases vaccine efficacy. So with that science holding, and there's no reason why that science shouldn't hold in the US, you would approximate that there would also potentially be an increase in vaccine efficacy with a longer interval, even though the vaccine efficacy is fantastic with a 4-week interval as well, just to be clear. But it's based on the immunological data we have and the vaccine efficacy that we've seen in the UK and across the UK Brazil studies.
Thank you, Mene. You had a second question, Clive.
Yes, it's about manufacturing. Where are the US doses being manufactured, and in Europe, what exactly is going on with the Helix plant in the Netherlands? Is it actually approved for UK or EU supply? And if not, why not?
Yeah, so Clive, the first question is very easy to answer. All the supply in the United States is produced in the United States, and including one of our sites is involved in that. Regarding the Helix question, you need to realize that this is a relatively small site in our overall supply chain network. Primarily, it was used for clinical trial material. So they are now going to produce over time for commercial. So we are well on track in order to get the approval by EMA in the course of March, beginning of April. So this is exactly according to our plan. So let's wait for that. But it's a relatively small part of our supply chain. The biggest part for the European supply chain is coming from the United States, as well as from the site in Belgium. So let me go to the next question. It's from Carolyn Johnson from the Washington Post. Caroline, over to you.
Thank you so much. I had two questions. One is, in the Janssen trial, there was a signal that in older adults with comorbidities, the vaccine appeared less efficacious. I was wondering if there was any kind of subgroup like that in your trial, or if you noticed anything similar. And then I was also wondering if you could just walk us through the timeline for the EUA in any greater detail, and when those first doses, the first 30 million, might possibly be delivered. Would it be as soon as April, or what's the timing?
Yeah, once again, I will take the second question, Mene, if you can take the first one.
Yeah, so what we've shown is that in the population that was older, the over 65 years of age, the vaccine efficacy was almost, I think, actually a little bit better. It was 80%, and as I said, 60% of the population had comorbidities. So again, our expectation, we haven't got the cuts now by comorbidities, but I think the vaccine efficacy across groups, whether you look at ethnic diversity, comorbidities, or age, is very, very similar across all those groups. So we don't see any drop of note.
And is it fair to say, Mene, that based on the real-world evidence studies in Scotland and Public Health England, it's more or less a confirmation of what we have seen from those studies?
That's absolutely correct, Ruud. The real-world evidence and vaccine implementation across the UK shows that the vaccine effectiveness is very high in these older age groups with comorbidities. With regards to filing, I can talk about the timing too for the EUA submission. We've already started submitting documents around CMC, and they have some of the data from the Oxford Brazil studies. Our intention is to get this US study filed with them in the next few weeks, and I mean a short number of weeks. And then obviously from then it's up to the FDA to opine on the data, review it as rapidly as they can, and then obviously have the appropriate advisory groups make their recommendations. But we're talking about a few weeks for the submission.
And once again, Caroline, the moment we have the EUA granted, we will deliver instantly 30 million doses, up to 50 million in the first month after the EUA approval. So it's a very substantial number of doses. The next question is from Rebecca Robbins from the New York Times. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you for taking my question. I just wanted to follow up on the question about the breakdown among the 141 cases that turned up in volunteers. I was wondering if you could walk us through the number of cases that turned up in the placebo group among those who were hospitalized or developed severe COVID, and then in the moderate and mild group, how that broke down between the vaccine group and the placebo group. Thank you.
Yeah, and Rebecca, we don't have all the breakdowns yet. Obviously, these are the high-level results that we've just got this weekend. We don't have all of the breakdown across different severities and different groups yet. I don't know, Anne, whether you want to answer that. Again, that's not something that we've put out in the release, because obviously we want to have a chance to look at the full analysis and get the submission done. That's a level of detail that we haven't disclosed yet.
Yeah, those data are yet to be disclosed, so we're anxiously awaiting the specifics.
There are enough severe cases, though, for us to be confident on the data from the severe disease, I think, is a reasonable thing to say.
Okay, thank you. The next one is from Ludwig Burger from Reuters. Ludwig, over to you.
Hey, thanks. Can you hear me well?
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks. Great. First up, my severe condolences and sincere condolences on the passing of Jose. And then I would like to ask the following questions on what information are you getting from the US side on the future use of your vaccines? Are you sure that these vaccines will be used, the volumes that you mentioned will be used for domestic use in the US, or are there plans by your US partners to donate or export them? And then secondly, I'd like to follow up on, if I can, on the Helix situation. Can you also update us on any separate GMP audit of the Helix site by the UK regulators? Is that necessary? Will you seek that? And when do you expect to get that?
Yeah, so let me try to answer the first one. Of course, we have discussed the data yesterday also with the US government, and of course they need to make up their own mind, but I think it's fair to say, and Mena was with me at yesterday morning, that they are very excited about the data set. All the doses, they belong to the US government. And personally, I would be highly surprised, Ludwig, if they will not be used in order to vaccinate Americans. There's still a huge need, but that's obviously not our decision. That's the decision of the US government. We are delivering the doses according to our contract, and it's up to them what they're going to do. But based on the reactions we saw yesterday from very important governmental officials, I would personally be highly surprised if it is not used. Regarding the Helix site, I fully acknowledge that there is a lot of interest of that site. I'm not going to give too many specifics about it. This meeting is really meant in order to talk about the exciting science and the results. The only thing I can say, Ludwig, it's a very small site in the overall supply chain we have set up for AstraZeneca. Once again, for Europe, by far the biggest ones are the sites in the United States and in Belgium. So I fully acknowledge all the sensitivities, but let's not speculate about that. And we are doing our best in order to deliver all the doses to Europeans as much as we can. And there's an enormous effort ongoing in order to do that. So let's go to the next question. That's from Madeleine Armstrong from EP Vantage. Madeleine, over to you.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. Actually, I've got a couple of questions. So again, just talking about the number of cases, I've seen a report that you, Ruud, have said to CNBC that you saw 5 cases of severe disease and 0 in placebo. Is that correct? And my second question was, given what you're saying about the dosing interval, will you try to seek like a longer dosing interval in the US, or is that again just up to the FDA to decide and perhaps go with the interval that was trialed in this trial? Thank you.
Mene, both questions I think are for you.
So that is correct, although there are more cases that have happened since the interim. And so the number will be higher. And you have to remember that it's a 2-to-1 vaccine to placebo. So it's highly significant. And again, we continue to have 0 cases on the vaccine arm as we look at the cases. With regards to the dosing interval, we will supply all of the data we have on the vaccine, both in terms of its implementation around the world and obviously from the US study. Then I think it'll be for the FDA and their advisory boards to determine what the optimal dosing regimen is for the US and for the US approval.
Thank you, Mene. The next question is from Anders Heisel from Degens Medicine. Anders, over to you. We cannot hear you, Anders. You need to unmute yourself. Anders. Okay, so that's we are not able. Any other questions? There's one written question here from the chat coming, and I'm reading it here from Dejan Diankov. A drop in the rate of credibility in the efficacy and quality of your vaccine has been detected in recent surveys carried out in the EU. How do you read this? And has there been any doubt in the ranks of AstraZeneca that your corporation has just been a target of malicious black PR attack organized by competitors? So I don't know, regarding the the credibility and
Yeah, so let me, Ruth, I think what I think is very pleasing about this study is it is a single study with a single batch run across countries. And I think for me, we've had absolute confidence in the efficacy of the vaccine, but I think seeing this data now, I hope gives others increased confidence that this is a very effective and safe vaccine. And I think that's for us. I don't think we've ever had any doubt that it's an effective vaccine, and the real world data that's coming out of the UK clearly demonstrates that in terms of the impact it's having on hospitalizations, mortality, and severe disease. But I think it's very nice to see this study read out now so positively and add further credibility and confidence to the use and implementation of this vaccine around the world.
Yeah, and once again, at the corporate level, we are delighted to see so many highly effective vaccines now available for people around the world. We said it multiple times, we're not competing against each other, we are all competing against one shared enemy, and that's the virus. So let's focus on that one. There's a question from Patrick Dock. While these results show no increased risk of blood clots, the Swedish Public Health Agency is worried about bleedings because of a low level of thrombocytes. Is there anything you can say about these feared bleedings in correlation to the AstraZeneca vaccine? Perhaps Andy, and then perhaps also one of the principal investigators of the US trial. Andy, you are overseeing a lot of this. Any remarks about thrombotic events?
Well, I think both the European Medicines Agency and the MHRA here in the UK have been reviewing the thrombotic events and see no overall risk of thrombosis compared with what's expected. And so they are looking at all these cases in great detail, and I have complete trust in our institutions to review that, and if there is any alert, that they would provide that information. But there's no concerns been raised by the regulators at this point.
And Professor Walsh, anything, because the DSMB looked into this with what I call the magnifying glass or Magda. Any remarks?
I'll let Magda voice her opinion.
So just to sort of echo what Andy mentioned is, that this is, we're glad that this is being investigated and has been investigated really thoroughly, and this is sort of kind of reflects how the safety and the signals that we see in clinical trials, sort of it doesn't negate the need for post authorization monitoring. So sort of reflects that all the systems are working in terms of sort of tracking of these cases, and some hypotheses are being proposed, but I think we just need more data to really fully understand the spectrum of what's being seen. But it's incredibly reassuring that the regulatory agencies have looked at the data thoroughly and have deemed it that there isn't an enhanced signal above and beyond what's seen kind of in the population. And in the US, following sort of as we move forward, there's also been very close scrutiny of the data of the clinical study, and there have been no concerning signals that have been noted. So we can say that with certainty.
Thank you so much, Magda. There's another question from Joe Pelka from NPR. Joe, please go ahead.
Hi, I wondered if you'd had any luck yet looking at the data by country, because I noticed in some of your earlier trials, the efficacy varied by country.
Great question, Joe. Mene, any flavor?
No, I haven't seen any cuts yet by country. But again, I think the large proportion of patients has come from the US study, so I think there'll be relatively little impact or discrepancy by country, in all honesty, given the numbers that we have.
Okay, then from the chat, there's another question from Maaike Tegeder. The 141 symptomatic cases, how many have you seen in the vaccinated group? Again, Mene, probably for you, 141 cases, how many have you seen in the vaccinated group?
And I think we need to be careful because again, we have to remember this is a 2-to-1 randomization. So actually the percentages, I think, are the important numbers in terms of the efficacy. And the vaccine efficacy is very consistent, that 79% across groups.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm looking at my screen, whether there are any other questions. There's another question here. Amongst the participants in the interim analysis, 4% of them are from Asia. May I ask if AstraZeneca will get more participants of Asians for research in the future, given many Asian countries in the region, including Hong Kong, are planning to use it? From Rachel Yo. So, an excellent question.
Can you just ask the question again, Ruan? We didn't catch the first bit.
So, in the interim analysis, 4% of the participants were from Asian origin. And the question is here because many Asian countries are going to use the AstraZeneca vaccine. Are you planning more studies with Asians specifically?
So we have obviously our study that we're running in Japan. But I think, again, no, I don't believe there are any Asian-specific studies that are planned at the moment. I think we have, again, a reasonable demographic in this study.
Andy?
Yeah, just to add, the Serum Institute of India has run an immunogenicity and safety study, and I think about 1,800 participants in India. And of course, our studies also included a small proportion here in the UK of individuals of Asian descent. And of course, now there's very large numbers of doses being used across South Asia, particularly in India and Bangladesh.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I believe Rebecca Robbins from the New York Times has another question. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you. One question I had is how much safety data the interim results you reported reflect? Is that 2 months interim safety data, or are you still accruing that level of safety data? And then my other question is, I was wondering if you could speak to how your team learned about the efficacy numbers from the DSMB. If you could narrate for us kind of when you got that information and how it was conveyed. Thank you.
Yeah, so Mene?
So, sorry, so the way it was conveyed is that we had a meeting with the DSMB over the weekend and they told us the results after they'd done all the additional analyses around safety, because they had ran some additional analyses because they really wanted to check on the thrombotic safety events. And so they'd asked for some additional analyses around safety, which they concluded. And once they'd done that, they then had a meeting with us and shared the results with the head of our team. The first part of the question, Rebecca, was what around whether we have the 2-month safety. We do have the 2-month follow-up already.
Okay.
Another question. That was it, Rebecca, right? Did I answer all your questions?
So I think we lost Rebecca, but I think you answered both questions, Mene. So Jenny Strasburg from the Wall Street Journal. Again, please, Jenny.
Great, thank you. I just wondered on the blood clotting issue, what are your thoughts about the two German and Norwegian scientists and what they presented late last week about the specific autoimmune response and the expectation that, you know, a fairly widely available blood thinning treatment could be enough to correct issues that arise, however isolated? And then secondly, do you expect export controls to impact any further shipments, and without even naming countries maybe, since you don't want to speak to the Halix situation, but do you expect that to be a further problem? Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. Andy, can you give a little bit your light on all the publications or the rumors? Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's very important that the regulators have a look at any new information that's being provided and look at that in great detail. And as I said before, at this moment, there haven't been concerns raised by the regulators, but it's absolutely essential, and I think we should expect it, that they would look at all new information as it comes.
Thank you, Jenny. And regarding the export restrictions, Jenny, once again, we are not politicians, so we leave it to them. The only thing I can say is that we have a global supply network, so we're highly dependent on our global supply network. And as such, we are hoping that we can have free goods moving from one place to another place. And once again, specifically for Europe, we are highly dependent of the drug substance coming from the United States. So I will leave it to there, but it's incredibly important that our goods can move from one geography to another geography. Okay, the next one is from Fergus Walsh from the BBC. Fergus, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Excellent results. Congratulations. Can I ask though a question on drug substance? Could you tell me whether any vaccine ingredients, any drug substance for UK production come from the EU? And secondly, are any doses for the UK market coming from overseas apart from the Serum Institute? Thank you.
So the first question is a clear no, Fergus. We have substantial drug substance capacity in the UK. Oxford Medica is doing that. Regarding the EU, once again, we are dependent, especially from our US side, in order to have enough drug substance for our EU supply, as it is the case from our side in Belgium. So I would like to leave it to...
There was one batch, right? There's one batch that's come from Helix to the UK that hasn't been approved yet, right? In terms of MHRA approval, but that was it. Otherwise, nothing. Just to be, so we get it right. Yeah.
Okay, the next question is from Anjali Kamlani, senior reporter from Yahoo Finance. Anjali, please.
Hi, yes, thanks for taking questions. Very quickly, just wanted to follow up on the manufacturing question, and that is that have you needed to use the U.S. government's offer of the Defense Production Act to assist in manufacturing at all? And what are some current, I guess, issues with manufacturing with regards to supplies or materials that you're running into still?
Yeah, so a good question. So first of all, we are getting a lot of support from the US government regarding our production sites, specifically in the United States. We are not in a shortage of any of our components. And the second question, Anjali, what was the second question?
Regarding the supply of materials, whether or not you're running into any issues. I know that early on, because everyone was trying to produce at the same time, there were issues with getting access to certain equipments or materials. So I just wanted to know if there's anything in terms of a squeeze on any supplies right now.
No, the short answer is absolutely a no. We have enough individual components, the files, the stoppers, as well as, of course, we are still trying to increase our yields. That's the most tricky part. How do we increase the yields of our reactors? And there's a lot of effort ongoing in order to improve that, and we have confidence that that will improve in the months to come. So we're almost there. So if there are no other questions, let me try to summarize what we have seen today. I think it's fair to say that we are very excited. Hopefully I can speak on behalf of the principal investigators with us today, that the data set is very, very robust. 79% reduction in efficacy against COVID-19 symptoms, 100% protection against severe disease, including hospitalization. And last but not least, this clinical trial clearly showed a high efficacy in the elderly, up to 80%. So all in all, a very robust set of numbers, and hopefully that will further generate the confidence in this vaccine. So thank you so much for all your interest today. And with that, I will close the call. Thank you.